It was a flurry of activity. Both my peoples and the Earth ambassador were more than a little anxious about this unknown rogue element that had somehow been welcomed to Earth. But if Bonnie Red held any particular feelings about their perspective, she definitely did not show it. Instead, she went along with us every step of the way as if she was supposed to be there. I think she was prepared to answer press questions all day, but she only got to answer a few. "Did you have a favorite pirate movie?" "Aye, Cap'n Jack Arrow." "Are you a pirate?" "I be a fortune seeker sailin' the void. I never attack ships, but if a ship comes and strikes me first, a little compensatory coin may find its way into me pockets. That's just fair compensation for me trouble, though." Bonnie patted the leather coin purse at her side. It jingled. She had actual bits of metal in there, though almost certainly not currency in the form pirates thought of it. She probably had the little credit transfer drives for energy reallocation. "Where'd you get your clothes?" That question came from a hovering drone emblazoned with a lot of different wild colors over it. I couldn't begin to imagine what agency it belonged to. She stepped beside the podium and struck a pose with her arms up to show off every line. "I had it made for me custom by a pioneer human living off-world. You be making quite a name for yourselves out there beyond the void." But even though I think she was willing to spend all day chattering, the ambassadors of two worlds were not prepared to let this rogue element go on longer than they had to in order to keep up appearances. They approached together to present a unified front. "Thank you for your interest in our people. Truly, her courage and openness is an inspiration to us all, but the journey was long and dangerous and Captain Bonnie Red, not to mention her crew, must be exhausted." My ambassador said first, only to immediately move aside to allow his human counterpart to take center stage. I could see from his sweating face that he was throwing away a well-prepared speech and adapting to the moment to get the unexpected out of there before anything crazy happened. "And there are formal matters to attend to. I must take her from you, but thank you all for this truly historic occasion." He then approached Captain Bonnie Red and held out his hand. She smacked her hand hard into his and shook it with vigor, the two of them looking toward the cameras to provide a fine and immortal display that would be in museums after everybody around us, human and Lamasa alike, were turned to dust and ash. Long after Percival's little tree was stretched up to the sky, this moment would linger on. I wish he were around to provide good advice. I'm sure he'd know how to make this work. I was fretting. I knew it. Bonnie at least seemed very enthusiastic about humans, and that worked in my favor. But on the downside of this, enthusiasm without knowledge was a ship without a captain. Bonnie, for her part, had the sense to go along with the two officials saying, "Send your customs folk in to inspect me ship, nothing there to hide, and me mates all know what's comin'." That was all it took for word to get passed on, and customs officials who had frankly never really had to do anything like this before, soon streamed out of a nearby building. There were dozens of them in bright blue skin-tight uniforms, no pockets, and hair cut close or shaved entirely clean. They were almost as perfectly uniform as some swarm species, but I knew why. Not every human is a good one, and thieves, while not the worst of the worst, exist. As such, they kept the human uniforms done in such a way that nobody could steal anything from a newcomer to Earth. They carried a series of small metal suitcases. I knew well enough, even without asking, what those were for. The first ship to land on Earth had been who knew where. As such, they had to check for any possible disease, disinfect, and inspect for contraband, up to and including trafficking of any kind. Manifests had to match, as did cargo and other material. Anything could wreak havoc if it was an unknown. No pets, no ship mascots, not even any plants or other creatures. Privately, I considered cross-contamination to be nearly inevitable. Ants get into every damn thing. I thought about the one I found crawling in my fur, despite having taken a shower. But every world engaging in the transport of goods and people alike had measures like this. But for the moment at least, all was well. I will spare the reader the details of assigning quarters. As it turned out, Bonnie Red's crew was not very large, only 300 strong compared to the 900 we were expecting. However, there was one problem. Me ship be badly damaged and will take several months to repair. Every male and female on me crew been in the void a long time, and they want shore leave 'fore we set sail again. I can cover their wages no problem, and they can sleep on the ship if they need to, but I be no fool. This here be a new world, and they need to know how to act. Any one of 'em turns crook, I've already told them, I won't help. Ye hang 'em from the mast if you want, make them walk the plank or whatever you do. None of me crew be allowed to mess with humans, Bonnie promised us when we sat down around the table. Fove stood back, still ogling the piratish-looking Dlamacin ship captain like she'd met a new idol. I was, I admit, jealous. Where is the other ship supposed to land when it gets here? Our ambassador asked his human counterpart. If this one is here for months. It wasn't a minor problem. The preparations for alien landings hadn't been done worldwide, even though the landing places were all built. All the equipment for guiding a ship weren't operational, and inspection crews specially trained in xenoship inspection and decontamination were rarer than feathers on fish. We can train new crews, and the landing port off the coast outside of New Kyoto is the nearest to completion. If we need to, we can keep your cargo ship docked in space and just make runs with smaller cargo vessels and the elevator system to fill your holds. It's not what we planned. I know. The human ambassador said as gently as he could. Clearly, he and my people's ambassador had spent ample time together, at least enough for the former to know how uncomfortable things going off script made us. And what about how to feed a crew of 900? Can your station do that for months? Our ambassador asked. With some ground support, yes. It may be a lot of dry rations instead of fresh food, but we'll manage. And if they want to land for a week of rest and relaxation after, then the ship can land here, or if New Kyoto's facilities are staffed and ready, there will be fine too. Maybe we can even see our way to handing a few cases of champagne to your embassy as a show of thanks for your patience while we get this sorted out. The promise of backup plans and hospitality, not to mention supplies and the possibility of gifts, was enough to set my own at ease. It was the first mistake I'd ever seen humans make, at least of that sort. The wrong ship landed, and their government had given it welcome. Of course, I later realized that this solidified the favorable view of humans held by many other species. If you're in danger, go for a human colony. Their hosting tendencies that I had written of so favorably before were on full display here. That all sounds fine, he finally muttered, but I could see from the wagging of his tail, as could the rest of us, that he was more eager for that champagne than he wanted to admit. It was then that Bonnie Red spoke up. Oh, an ambassador, we've got one extra body on board who doesn't plan on leaving with us. A passenger, if you can believe it. From the homeworld, no less. She'll need papers from you so she can stay, and if she can't, then she'll need a way off-world. You plan on deporting her. I don't mind, but I'm going to have to charge you 10,000 times what it cost to bring her. It was the price, more than the passenger, that caused us all dismay. 10,000 times. It wasn't us who spoke up, but Fove who could hardly believe it. She might have been criticized for it, or asked to leave, but she was echoing our sentiment. Aye, lass, the liquor I come here for, well, it's worth more credits than you can count. I plan on filling my ship to the brink with every bottle and brew we can carry. I got no room for a passenger, what gonna cost me money? Bonnie Red gave a vigorous shake of her head. Then why did you take her on and bring her here? My ambassador seethed, and Bonnie cocked her head at him as if he were a dunce. On account of she paid me, Bonnie replied like he was the thickest of our kind. Welcome to Earth, Fove said matter-of-factly, and nobody was going to tell her she was wrong in what she meant. I and the other students, Fove, the security guards, we were ejected from the meeting for a time after that. Only Professor Sixlith remained, and he had only one question for me when he came out. Voices were being raised after his briefing to the captain about how to behave on Earth. He asked me with many a nervous licking of his eyeballs as he emerged, "Are you sure you can succeed with your test if you use this crew? Captain Bonnie has told us some of the sorts of things she's been up to over the years, and, by your race's standards, she might be literally insane." I don't really have a choice, Professor. They're here. If I refuse, the university will say I'm tainting my experiment. They'll override you, saying I'm trying to insert bias. I think it will work better than the others, but even if it doesn't? I just looked at him after I answered, letting him put the pieces together for himself. He made a tentative bow. I'm sorry, you're right. Get the supplies you need as quickly as you can. It will be fine. Byron reassured us. If they're at all like her, my people will get along well with her and hers. Soldiers are outliers in their societies, like I get on with Boatswain here. Byron jerked a thumb toward his companion. I don't know much about science, but if you want to know how well our species can work together, you couldn't ask for a better group to test it on, Bosun remarked, completing Byron's sentence for him. Fauve was watching quietly and typing away on her mobile device, I assume on her Chaos app to tell her friends what it was like. Humans have a thorough love of their electronic devices, and she was no exception to this rule. I had my mind elsewhere. Professor Sklith did not use the term insane lightly. If he thought the crew was insane by my species standards, well then they probably were. I couldn't help but be anxious despite Bosvin and Byron's reassurances. What if what made them outliers was that they would not get on with humans? What if they didn't want to participate? I might be able to make it up with the other crew, but it wouldn't look good. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? I had no idea. I could only really expect to go forward, but even doing that required decisions, and even when there was no choice but one, it might still be the wrong one. Had I entered into a no-win scenario? I just didn't want to leave. Is that so wrong? Is that so bad? I asked myself. My tail was stiff, and though I kept the worst of my anxiety at bay, I could help but fear the worst. You're such a stupid coward, I admit. I cursed myself for a fool and a coward all over again. I just didn't have the courage to admit I might be failing here. I was so lost in my own thoughts that I barely noticed anything else around me until Bonnie Red emerged, looking and smelling smug, with her tail wagging around behind her, minus her sword, which sat in the hands of the human ambassador. "All right, matey, you the Bailey one, can you be ready by tomorrow?" Bonnie asked, and leveled her hand at me. "To help with the alcohol?" I asked. "Course I hear tell about that game. Sounds might interestin', but maybe later?" She slowed and then stopped her talking. Her dubious enthusiasm dulled into a trance-like state. Fauve must have drawn the ball out of her pocket at some point and had started bouncing it against the wall out of sheer boredom, and now its little thock noise and constant motion drew Bonnie's attention. Her head moved back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, as the ball blurred past, back and forth into Fauve's hands. Fauve noticed after a few throws and caught the ball in one hand. She held it up. "Do you want it?" Bonnie said only, "I don't know why, but I do. I really, really do." "Then you have to help Bailey when he says," Fauve replied. Bonnie turned her face toward me, but one eye lingered on the ball as Fauve tossed it up and down in one hand, her head bobbing up and down while she asked me, "So about the game tomorrow, are you ready?" "I can have all the supplies I need today, but..." I looked over toward Byron. "I can get a dozen men easy big ones. It's a weekend and most of them have nothing to do. Besides, they had fun last time. They won't pass the chance up to do it again." Byron's answer was a significant relief, but I knew better than to hope for the best. We made our excuses after that. I had just enough time to find out that Bonnie would have a link from her ship to the embassy comm system, and then we left. Fauve, however, kept tossing the ball straight up and down in the air. I'm sure that if she'd thrown it straight ahead, Bonnie would have chased it down. But I had no time to consider that. I needed a backup plan. So before we even boarded the bus, admittedly, I might have been rude in not bidding my professor or the other students farewell, but I had my mind elsewhere. So before I even boarded the bus, I was reaching out to the University of Louisville, specifically to Lisa and Coach Wills. As tomorrow was a Saturday rather than a Sunday, there was no game going on, but I needed to make sure everything was in place. My hearts raced, and I felt Fauve's hand squeezing around mine. She could feel I was nervous, anxious, and frankly terrified of failure, more so than I ever had been in all my life. I'd need every ounce of mental strength to hold myself together. My tail alternated between wagging like mad with the promise of success and stiff to the point of shaking with the fear of failure. "So, what if it doesn't go well?" Fauve asked on the ride home. "Then I report it," I said. There was no other option for me, so the answer seemed obvious. "Even if it cost you your stay?" she asked. I was quiet for a long time, at least 5 minutes, but it felt like a lot longer. "Yes," I finally answered. "I'm a Dlamisa of science. I have to report the facts, not my wishes. Of course, failure in science can be success. All studies begin with the idea that you're wrong. That's why you attack your ideas, not just defend them. Even if the study doesn't show what I hope it will, knowing one way that we as different species don't effectively bond is bringing us closer to the truth of how we can." She inhaled sharply through her nose and squeezed my hand again. She felt so warm to the touch, even through my fur. "You're a lot braver than you think you are, Bailey," she said quietly. She offered no explanation, and I had no idea what she meant.